The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's General Hospital buzzed overhead as Marcus Chen paced the waiting room, his work boots squeaking against the polished linoleum floor. His hands were still stained with motor oil from the auto shop where he'd been working when the call came in. His grandmother, the woman who had raised him since he was 7 years old, had collapsed at the grocery store. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus had driven like a madman through downtown Portland, running 2 red lights and nearly rear-ending a delivery truck in his desperation to get to the hospital. Now, standing in the sterile corridor outside the ICU, he felt more helpless than he had in years. The nurses kept telling him the same thing over and over. "I'm sorry, but we can only provide updates to immediate family members." "She is my immediate family," Marcus had insisted, his voice cracking with frustration. "She raised me. She's all I have." The head nurse, a stern woman with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun, had looked at him with practiced sympathy. "I understand your situation, Mr. Chen, but hospital policy is very clear. You can only discuss a patient's condition with spouses, children, or siblings, unless you have legal guardianship papers." Marcus didn't have legal guardianship papers. His grandmother, Alina Vasquez, had taken him in after his parents died in a car accident. But they'd never formalized the arrangement through the courts. She'd simply opened her small apartment to a grieving 7-year-old boy and raised him as her own. Now, at 28, Marcus was being told that their bond meant nothing in the eyes of hospital bureaucracy. He was about to storm out of the building when he heard a soft voice behind him. "Excuse me, are you Marcus?" Marcus turned to see a young woman with kind brown eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing scrubs decorated with tiny cartoon cats, and there was a stethoscope draped around her neck. Her name tag read Riley Thompson, RN. "Yeah, that's me," Marcus replied, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Do you know something about my grandmother?" Riley glanced around the busy corridor before stepping closer to him. "I overheard your conversation with Nancy at the desk. Alina Vasquez is your grandmother?" "She is. Well, not biologically, but she's the only family I've ever known. These people won't tell me anything because I'm not her immediate family, according to their stupid rules." Riley bit her lower lip, seeming to wrestle with something internally. "Listen, I'm not supposed to be telling you this, but your grandmother is stable. She had a mild heart attack, but she's responding well to treatment. Dr. Harrison thinks she'll make a full recovery." The relief that washed over Marcus was so intense that he had to steady himself against the wall. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you so much for telling me that." "There's something else," Riley said, glancing around again to make sure no one was listening. "If you want to see her, if you want to be involved in her care decisions, there might be a way." Marcus looked at her with desperate hope. "What do you mean? The system only recognizes certain relationships? Spouses are one of them. If you were married?" Riley trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "But I'm not married," Marcus said, confused. Riley took a deep breath. "Not yet. But if someone were to say they were your wife, if they vouched for your relationship with Alina, then you'd have access as her son-in-law." The idea was so audacious that Marcus almost laughed. "Are you suggesting I find some random woman to pretend to be my wife just so I can see my grandmother?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Riley said carefully. "I'm just explaining how the system works." Des stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the unspoken offer hanging between them. Finally, Marcus found his voice. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Riley's expression softened. "Because I've seen too many people kept away from their loved ones by bureaucratic nonsense. Elena's been asking for you since she woke up. She keeps saying, 'Where's my Marcus? Where's my boy?' It's breaking my heart." Before Marcus could respond, Riley made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Come with me," she said, walking toward the reception desk. Marcus followed, his heart pounding as Riley approached Nancy, the head nurse who had been giving him such a hard time. "Nancy," Riley said in a professional tone, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Chen and his wife. They're here about Alina Vasquez." Nancy looked up from her computer, her expression skeptical. His wife? He didn't mention a wife earlier. Riley smiled warmly and, to Marcus's shock, slipped her hand into his. Sometimes people forget to mention the obvious things when they're upset. Isn't that right, honey? Marcus stared at Riley in amazement. This woman, whom he'd met less than 10 minutes ago, was putting her job on the line to help him see his grandmother. He squeezed her hand gently. "That's right," he managed to say. "I was so worried about Elena that I wasn't thinking straight." Nancy's expression remained dubious, but hospital policy was hospital policy. "I'll need to see some identification from both of you." Marcus pulled out his driver's license, and Riley did the same. Nancy examined them carefully, noting that they had different last names. "You kept your maiden name?" Nancy asked Riley. "Yes," Riley replied without missing a beat. "It's 2023. Lots of women keep their maiden names." Nancy made a note on the computer. "Fine, room 314. But visiting hours end at 9 p.m. sharp." As they walked toward the elevator, Marcus felt like he was in a dream. "I can't believe you just did that," he whispered to Riley. "Neither can I," Riley admitted, pressing the button for the third floor. "I could lose my job if anyone finds out." "Then why did you do it?" Riley was quiet for a moment as the elevator climbed. "'Cause sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following the rules." When the elevator doors opened on the third floor, Marcus felt his anxiety spike again. He was about to see his grandmother, the woman who had sacrificed so much to raise him, lying in a hospital bed. Riley seemed to sense his nervousness. "She's going to be okay," Riley said softly. "Dr. Harrison is one of the best cardiologists in the state. Elena's in good hands." They walked down the corridor together, Riley still holding Marcus's hand to maintain their charade. Other nurses nodded to Riley as they passed, and Marcus realized that she was well-liked and respected by her colleagues. The fact that she was risking her reputation for a complete stranger made her actions even more remarkable. Room 314 was at the end of the hall. Through the partially open door, Marcus could see his grandmother lying in the hospital bed, various monitors beeping softly around her. She looked so small and fragile, nothing like the strong woman who had taught him how to tie his shoes, helped him with his homework, and worked 2 jobs to make sure he had everything he needed. "Elena," Riley called softly as they entered the room. "You have visitors?" Elena's eyes fluttered open, and when she saw Marcus, her face lit up with joy. "Marcus, my boy, I was so worried you wouldn't come." Marcus rushed to her bedside, tears streaming down his face. "Of course I came, abuela. I'll always come when you need me." Elena reached up to touch his cheek with a trembling hand. "You look tired, mijo. Are you eating enough? You know I worry about you living alone in that apartment." "I'm fine, abuela." "Don't worry about me. How are you feeling?" "It's like I got hit by a truck," Elena said with a weak smile. "But I'm tough, and it'll take more than a little heart attack to keep me down." Elena's eyes shifted to Riley, who was standing quietly near the door. "And who is this beautiful young woman?" Marcus felt panic rise in his chest. He had been so focused on seeing his grandmother that he hadn't thought about how to explain Riley's presence, but once again, Riley saved the day. "Hello, Mrs. Vasquez," Riley said, stepping forward with a warm smile. "I'm Riley. I work here at the hospital, and I wanted to make sure Marcus could be with you during this difficult time." Elena studied Riley with sharp eyes. Despite her condition, she was still the observant woman who had raised Marcus. "Oh, you're very kind, dear. Not many people would go out of their way for strangers these days." "Marcus isn't a stranger," Riley said, and Marcus was surprised by the conviction in her voice. "Anyone who loves you as much as he does is someone worth helping." Elena smiled and patted the side of her bed. "Sit down, both of you. Tell me what?" "The doctors are saying, and don't sugarcoat it, I'm not made of glass." For the next hour, Riley explained Elena's condition in terms that were both honest and reassuring. She had indeed suffered a mild heart attack, but the damage to her heart muscle was minimal. With the right medication and some lifestyle changes, she could expect to live a normal, healthy life for many years to come. "The most important thing is that you don't try to do too much too soon," Riley explained. "You'll need to take it easy for the next few weeks while your heart heals." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Alina nodded seriously. I understand. But what about my job at the diner? I can't afford to take weeks off work. This was exactly what Marcus had been dreading. His grandmother had been working as a waitress at a 24-hour diner for the past 15 years, and he knew she couldn't afford to lose the income. He also knew she was too proud to accept charity even from him. Don't worry about the diner right now, Marcus said. We'll figure something out. How? Alina asked bluntly. You barely? Make enough at the garage to cover your own expenses. I won't be a burden to you, Marcus. You're not a burden, Marcus said firmly. You never have been. You took care of me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn to take care of you. Alina's eyes filled with tears. You're a good boy, Marcus. But being good doesn't pay the bills. Riley had been listening to this exchange in thoughtful silence. Finally, she spoke up. Mrs. Vasquez, what if there were a way for you to take the time you need to recover without worrying about money? What if someone could help cover your expenses while you're out of work? Lena looked at Riley suspiciously. I don't accept charity. Dear, it wouldn't be charity, Riley said carefully. It would be a family helping family. The room fell silent as Alina processed Riley's words. Marcus held his breath, wondering where Riley was going with this. Family, Alina repeated slowly. Riley looked at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that he couldn't quite identify. It was as if she was asking for permission to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Marcus and I, we care about each other very much, Riley said, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was implying. And anyone who matters to Marcus matters to me. Elena's sharp eyes moved back and forth between Marcus and Riley, reading the subtext of their interaction. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and confusion. So this woman was pretending not just to be his wife to the hospital staff, but now she seemed to be extending the charade to his grandmother as well. How long have you two been together? Lena asked shrewdly. Riley and Marcus exchanged a panicked glance. They hadn't discussed their fake relationship in any detail, and now they were about to be exposed by Elena's natural curiosity. Not long. Riley said quickly, We met recently, but sometimes you just know, you know? Alina studied them for a long moment, and Marcus was certain she was about to call them out on their obvious deception. Instead, she smiled. I knew the moment I met Marcus's grandfather that he was the one, Alina said softly. Some connections are just meant to be. Marcus felt a strange flutter in his chest at Elena's words. He glanced at Riley and was surprised to see her cheeks had turned pink. Well, Alina continued, if you're going to be part of this family, Riley, then you need to know that we take care of each other. No handouts, no charity. If you want to help, then we find a way for it to be fair. What do you mean? Riley asked. Elena's eyes lit up with an idea. I've been thinking about retiring from the diner anyway. My arthritis has been acting up, and standing on my feet for 12 hours a day isn't getting any easier. What if instead of going back to waitressing, I started a small catering business? I could work from home, set my own hours, and use all those recipes I've been perfecting for the past 50 years. Marcus felt a surge of excitement. Abuela, that's a brilliant idea. Your cooking is incredible. People would line up around the block for your tamales alone. But starting a business takes money, Alina said pragmatically. Money for equipment, ingredients, permits, advertising. Riley leaned forward. What if that's how I could help? Not as charity, but as an investment. I could provide the startup capital, and you could pay me back as the business grows. Alina considered this proposal carefully. You would really do that? Invest in an old woman's pipe dream? It's not a pipe dream, Riley said firmly. Marcus is right. Your cooking is incredible. I've only known you for an hour, but I can already tell you're the kind of person who succeeds at whatever she sets her mind to. Lena smiled, and Marcus could see the wheels turning in her head. All right, Riley, if you're serious about this, then we have a deal. But I insist on paying you back with interest. Deal, Riley said, extending her hand for Alina to shake. As Marcus watched this interaction, he felt something shifting inside him. Riley wasn't just helping him see his grandmother anymore. She was becoming genuinely invested in Elena's well-being. In their future, the line between pretense and reality was beginning to blur. Visiting hours ended at 9 p.m., just as Nancy had warned them, as they prepared to leave. Alina grabbed Riley's hand. "Thank you, dear," Alina said with tears in her eyes. "For everything. I haven't felt this hopeful about the future in years." Riley squeezed Alina's hand gently. "I'll be back tomorrow, Mrs. Vasquez. We can start making plans for your catering business. Please call me Abuela," Alina said with a smile. "Going to be family? You might as well start acting like it." As they left the hospital, Marcus and Riley walked in comfortable silence toward the parking garage. The weight of what had just happened was beginning to settle on both of them. "Riley," Marcus finally said as they reached his beat-up Honda Civic, "I don't know how to thank you for what you did tonight." Riley stopped walking and turned to face him. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the parking garage, Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had just worked a 12-hour shift and then spent her evening helping a complete stranger navigate a family crisis. "You don't need to thank me," Riley said softly. "I'm just glad Alina is going to be okay. But you risked your job for us. You lied to your colleagues. You offered to invest your own money in my grandmother's business. Why would you do all that for people you barely know?" Riley was quiet for a long moment, staring at the concrete floor of the parking garage. When she finally looked up, there was something vulnerable in her expression. Because she said quietly, "I know what it's like to feel alone in the world. And I know what it's like to have someone step up when you need them most." His heart clenched at the pain in her voice. "Riley, ... My parents died when I was 16, Riley continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Car accident. I was in foster care for 2 years until I aged out of the system. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through nursing school, and I've been on my own ever since." The parallels between their stories were striking, and Marcus felt a deep connection to this woman who had already done so much for him. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. "I had no idea." Riley shrugged. "It's not something I usually share with people. But when I saw you tonight, fighting to be with the woman who raised you, it reminded me of how desperately I would have wanted someone to fight for me when I was alone." Marcus stepped closer to Riley, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. "You're not alone anymore." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that neither of them was ready to examine too closely. Riley looked up at Marcus, and for a moment, the pretense fell away completely. They weren't playing roles anymore. They were just 2 people who had found something unexpected in each other. "I should go," Riley said finally, breaking the spell. "I have an early shift tomorrow." "Wait," Marcus said quickly. "How do I find you? How do we ... coordinate this whole thing?" Riley pulled a pen from her pocket and wrote her phone number on a piece of paper from her purse. "Text me tomorrow. We'll figure out how to keep our story straight." As Riley walked away toward her own car, Marcus stood in the parking garage, feeling like his entire world had shifted on its axis. He had gone to the hospital expecting to fight, bureaucracy, and possibly say goodbye to his grandmother. Instead, he had found an ally, a friend, and maybe something more. 3 weeks had passed since Alina's heart attack, and what had started as a simple deception was becoming increasingly complicated. Marcus found himself looking forward to Riley's daily visits to Elena's apartment more than he cared to admit. She would arrive each evening after her shift at the hospital, bringing groceries, helping Alina with her physical therapy exercises, and discussing business plans for the catering venture that was slowly taking shape. Tonight was different, though. Lena had been discharged from the hospital 5 days ago, and Dr. Harrison had cleared her for light activities. She was sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks filled with recipes, supplier contact information, and business projections that Riley had helped her create. The small apartment smelled like cinnamon and vanilla from the test batch of cookies Alina had baked that afternoon. "These financial projections look solid," Riley said, reviewing Elena's handwritten notes. "If we can get 5 regular clients to start with, you'll be profitable within 6 months." Lena beamed with pride. "I never thought I'd be starting a new career at 68 years old. When I was your age, Riley, women didn't have these kinds of opportunities." Marcus watched from the doorway as Riley and Alina worked together, their heads bent over the papers. In the past 3 weeks, he had witnessed something remarkable. Riley had seamlessly integrated herself into their small family unit. She remembered Elena's medication schedule better than he did, knew exactly how Elena liked her coffee, and had even learned to make Elena's famous salsa verde from scratch. But it was the small moments that affected Marcus the most. The way Riley would absent-mindedly squeeze Elena's shoulder when she passed behind her chair. How she would bring Elena's favorite magazines without being asked. The genuine laughter that filled the apartment when the two women shared stories about their respective childhoods. Riley had become indispensable to them both, and that realization terrified Marcus. "Marcus, mijo, come sit with us," Elena called, noticing him hovering in the doorway. "Riley has some wonderful ideas for expanding the catering menu." Marcus joined them at the table, taking the seat across from Riley. She looked tired. She had been pulling extra shifts at the hospital to save money for Elena's business investment, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "How was work today?" Riley asked the same question she'd been asking him every evening for the past 3 weeks. "Busy," Marcus replied, which was his standard answer. He didn't want to admit that he'd been distracted all day, thinking about coming home to find Riley. "There. Jimmy's been giving me more complex repair jobs. Think he's finally starting to trust me with the expensive cars." Elena clapped her hands together. "That's wonderful. Jimmy's been running that garage for 30 years, if he's trusting you. With the luxury vehicles, it means he sees your potential." Riley smiled warmly. "Elena's right. You should be proud of yourself." The easy domesticity of the moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Elena frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and most of her neighbors knew better than to disturb her in the evenings. Marcus got up to answer the door, and his heart sank when he saw who was standing in the hallway. It was his coworker, Danny Martinez, holding a 6-pack of beer and grinning broadly. "Surprise," Danny said, pushing past Marcus into the apartment. "I brought beer to celebrate your grandmother's recovery. I've been meaning to stop by for weeks, but you know how crazy things have been at the shop." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. Danny had no idea about the elaborate deception he and Riley had been maintaining. In Danny's mind, Marcus was still the single guy who spent most of his free time working on his motorcycle and playing video games. "Danny, this isn't really a good time," Marcus said, trying to steer his friend back toward the door. But Danny had already spotted Riley and Elena at the kitchen table, and his eyes widened with interest. Well, Marcus Chen. You've been holding out on me." Elena looked up from her papers with a welcoming smile. "You must be one of Marcus's friends from work. I'm Elena, his grandmother." Danny set the beer down on the counter and walked over to shake Elena's hand. "Danny Martinez. I've heard so much about you, Mrs. Vasquez. Marcus talks about you all the time. You must be Riley," Danny continued, turning to look at her with unconcealed curiosity. "Though Marcus has been keeping you a secret, I had no idea he was seeing anyone." Riley's face went pale, and Marcus felt like the ground was about to give way beneath his feet. They had been so focused on maintaining their deception at the hospital, and with Elena, that they hadn't considered what would happen when their two worlds collided. "Actually," Marcus said quickly, "Riley and I haven't been together very long. I didn't want to say anything at work until I was sure it was serious." Danny raised an eyebrow. "Must be pretty serious if she's helping plan your grandmother's business venture. I saw all those papers on the table. Looks like you two are really committed to this family thing." Elena, who had been quietly observing this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Danny, would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "That would be great, Mrs. Vasquez," Danny said, settling into the chair next to Riley. "So, Riley, what do you do for work?" Riley glanced at Marcus with barely concealed panic. "I'm a nurse at St. Mary's General." "Oh, that's where Mrs. Vasquez was treated, right?" Danny said innocently. "What a coincidence that you two met right when she needed medical care." The room fell silent. Marcus could see the wheels turning in Danny's head as he began to piece together the timeline. Riley's hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. Elena, however, seemed completely unfazed by the growing tension. "It wasn't a coincidence at all," she said calmly. "It was fate." Danny looked confused. "Fate. Sometimes. The universe puts people in our lives exactly when we need them most," Elena continued, her voice taking on the storytelling tone she had used when Marcus was a child. Riley didn't just help Marcus navigate the hospital bureaucracy. She gave him the courage to fight for what mattered most. Marcus stared at his grandmother in amazement. Elena knew. She had known all along that their relationship was fake, but she was choosing to protect them anyway. "That's beautiful," Danny said, though he still looked puzzled. "But I'm confused about the timeline." "Marcus, you said you and Riley haven't been together very long. But it sounds like you met during your grandmother's emergency." "That was almost a month ago." Riley took a deep breath, and Marcus could see her making a decision. "Danny, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Have you ever done something that felt wrong but was actually right? Something that went against the rules, but served a greater good?" Danny considered this question seriously. "Yeah, I guess so. Like when I helped my cousin fix his immigration paperwork even though I knew he was cutting some corners. Technically, it wasn't by the book, but he's a good guy who just needed a chance." Riley nodded. "That's exactly what this is. It's Marcus and I. We did something that wasn't technically honest, but it was the right thing to do for Elena." The room was quiet as Danny processed this information. Marcus held his breath, waiting to see how his friend would react to learning about their deception. Finally, Danny spoke. "You pretended to be married so Marcus could see his grandmother in the hospital." "Yes," Riley said simply. Danny looked. At Marcus, then at Riley, then at Elena, who was calmly sipping her coffee as if this revelation was no big deal. "And now?" Danny asked. "Now what?" Marcus replied. "Are you still pretending?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked at Riley, and she looked back at him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, they were forced to confront the reality of what they had become. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. Danny leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Man, you two really stepped in it, didn't you?" Elena set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. "Danny, I like you. You seem like a good friend to Marcus.
Yes.
But I need you to understand something." "What's that, Mrs. Vasquez?" "Riley did for my grandson, for our family, was the most selfless act I've witnessed in my 68 years on this earth. She risked her job, her reputation, and her own well-being to help 2 strangers. That kind of character is rare." Lena turned to look at Riley with tears in her eyes. "What Marcus did, fighting to be with me when I needed him most. That's the kind of love that can't be faked, real or pretend. These two have something special." Danny nodded slowly. "I can see that. But what happens now? You can't keep pretending forever." It was a question that Marcus had been avoiding for weeks. What did happen now? How did they untangle a web of lies that had become so intertwined with genuine feelings and real relationships? Riley stood up abruptly. "I should go. I have an early shift tomorrow." Marcus could see the pain in her eyes, and he realized that Danny's questions had forced her to confront the temporary nature of their arrangement. She had been living in a fantasy where she belonged to a family, where she had people who cared about her, where she wasn't alone in the world. "Riley, wait," Marcus said, standing up as well. But Riley was already gathering her purse and jacket. "Elena, I'll call you tomorrow about the supplier meeting." "Danny, it was nice meeting you." She was almost to the door when Elena's voice stopped her. "Riley, dear, before you go, I have something I want to say." Riley turned around, and Marcus could see tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," Elena continued. "About this whole situation, about what it means, about what happens next." Lena slowly got up from her chair and walked over to Riley. "When I was a young woman, I fell in love with Marcus's grandfather. But our families didn't approve of the match. He was Mexican, I was Puerto Rican, and in those days, that mattered to people. We were told that our love wasn't real, that it was just infatuation, that it wouldn't last." Lena took Riley's hands in hers. "We proved them wrong. We were married for 42 years, until the day he died. And do you know what I learned in all those years?" Riley shook her head, unable to speak. "I learned that love isn't about how you start. It's about how you choose to continue. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard. It's about putting someone else's needs before your own. It's about becoming family, not just saying you are." Elena smiled through her own tears. "You've been showing up for us every day for 3 weeks, Riley. You've put our needs before your own. You've become family. I don't care how it started. I care about who you are now." The apartment was completely silent, except for the ticking of Elena's old clock on the mantel. Marcus felt like his heart was going to burst from his chest. Riley looked at Alina, then at Marcus, then back at Alina. But what if I'm not good enough? What if I can't be what you need me to be? Alina laughed, a sound full of warmth and love. Mia, you already are everything we need you to be. The question is, are we everything you need us to be? Riley broke down completely then, sobbing into Alina's shoulder as the older woman held her tight. Marcus felt tears running down his own cheeks as he watched the two most important women in his life embrace. Danny cleared his throat awkwardly. I think maybe I should go. Marcus walked his friend to the door, and Danny paused in the hallway. For what it's worth, man, I think your grandmother is right. That woman in there loves you both, and you'd be an idiot to let her go. It's complicated, Marcus said. The best things usually are, Danny replied, but sometimes complicated is worth it. After Danny left, Marcus returned to the kitchen to find Riley and Alina still holding each other. When they finally separated, both women were smiling through their tears, so Alina said, looking back and forth between Marcus and Riley. What happens now? Marcus took a deep breath. For 3 weeks, he had been living in a state of suspended animation, afraid to examine his feelings too closely, afraid to hope for something that seemed too good to be true. But watching Riley's breakdown, seeing her vulnerability and fear, had crystallized something for him.
Ow,
Marcus said, walking over to Riley and taking her hand. We stopped pretending. Riley looked up at him with confusion. What do you mean? Marcus smiled, feeling more certain than he had about anything in his entire life. I mean, we stopped pretending that this isn't real. We stopped pretending that we're just playing roles. We stopped pretending that we don't care about each other. Riley's eyes widened. Marcus, ... I love you, Marcus said simply. I don't know when it happened or how it happened, but it did. And I hope ... that maybe you love me too. Riley stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus held his breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she smiled. I've been love you. I've been so scared to admit it because I thought this was all just temporary, just a game we were playing. But it's not a game anymore, is it? No, Marcus said, pulling her into his arms. It's not a game anymore. Lena clapped her hands together with delight. Well, it's about time you two figured that out. I was starting to think I'd have to spell it out. For you, Marcus and Riley laughed, still holding each other. The pretense was over. But the reality was just beginning. The morning after their emotional breakthrough brought an unexpected visitor to Elena's apartment. Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee when he heard a firm knock at the door. The peephole, he saw Nancy, the stern head nurse from St. Mary's General Hospital, standing in the hallway with a clipboard and a grim expression. Marcus's stomach dropped, quickly woke Riley, who had spent the night on Elena's couch after their late conversation about their feelings. She took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. It's Nancy from the hospital, Marcus whispered. She's here. Riley's face went white. She knows. Alina, who had been awakened by their hushed conversation, sat up in her bed and listened as Marcus explained the situation. Without hesitation, she got up and put on her robe. Let her in, Alina said calmly. Whatever this is about, we'll face it together. Marcus opened the door to find Nancy looking as intimidating as ever, her gray hair pulled back severely and her expression unreadable. Good morning, Mr. Chen, Nancy said, stepping into the apartment without invitation. I hope I'm not interrupting. Anything important? Not at all, Marcus replied, though his voice was tight with anxiety. What brings you here? Nancy's eyes swept the apartment, taking in the cozy domestic scene, Riley in her pajamas with her hair messed from sleep, Alina in her bathrobe, the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Her gaze lingered on the couch where Riley had obviously spent the night. I've been conducting a routine review of patient files from last month, Nancy said, consulting her clipboard. As part of our quality assurance process, we occasionally verify the information provided during patient admissions. Riley stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly despite the fear in her eyes. What kind of verification? Nancy smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. Well, for instance, we might check marriage records for couples who claimed spousal privileges during a patient's stay. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus felt like he couldn't breathe. And what did you find? Lena asked, her voice steady. Nancy flipped through the papers on her clipboard with deliberate slowness. I found it very interesting that there's no record of a marriage between Marcus Chen and Riley Thompson in the state of Oregon, or Washington, or California. For that matter, Riley's hands were shaken, but she kept her voice level. We were married out of state. Which state? Nancy asked immediately. Riley opened her mouth, but no words came out. Marcus could see her mind racing, trying to come up with a convincing lie, but they hadn't prepared for this level of scrutiny. Nevada. Marcus said quickly, we eloped in Las Vegas. Nancy made a note on her clipboard. Date. August 15th, Riley said, picking a random date. Which year? Nancy pressed. Marcus and Riley exchanged a panicked glance. They were digging themselves deeper into a hole with every lie. Alina stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding the room's attention. Nancy, is it? Yes, ma'am. Nancy, I'd like to ask you a question. How long have you been a nurse? Nancy looked confused by the change of subject. 23 years. And in those 23 years, how many families have you seen torn apart by bureaucratic red tape? How many people have you watched suffer because they couldn't be with their loved ones during medical emergencies? Nancy's expression softened slightly, but she maintained her professional demeanor. Mrs. Vasquez, I understand that hospital policies can seem harsh, but they exist for good reasons. We have to protect patient privacy and ensure that only authorized individuals have access to medical information. Authorized, Alina repeated thoughtfully. Tell me, Nancy, what makes someone authorized to love another person? What gives them the right to care about someone's well-being? The law, Nancy replied automatically. Alina smiled sadly. The law. Yes, I suppose that's one way to look at it. But let me tell you about another perspective. Lena walked over to an old photo album on her bookshelf and pulled out a yellowed photograph. She handed it to Nancy. This is a picture of me and my husband on our wedding day in 1962. We were married by a justice of the peace in a courthouse in San Antonio, Texas. No fancy ceremony, no big celebration, just two people who loved each other making a commitment. Looked at the photograph politely, clearly not understanding the relevance. 6 months later, Alina continued, my husband was in a car accident in El Paso. When I got to the hospital, they wouldn't let me see him because I couldn't prove we were married. The certificate was in a safe deposit box back in San Antonio, and this was before computers made everything accessible instantly. Nancy's expression began to change as she realized where the story was heading. I sat in that waiting room for 8 hours, not knowing if the man I loved was alive or dead because I couldn't produce the right piece of paper. A janitor finally took pity on me and snuck me into his room during a shift change. Elena's voice became stronger, more forceful. That piece of paper didn't make me love my husband any less when I couldn't prove our marriage. And it didn't make me love him any more when I finally retrieved it the next day. Love doesn't require documentation, Nancy. Family doesn't need authorization. Nancy was quiet, clearly affected by Elena's story but still bound by her professional obligations. Mrs. Vasquez, I sympathize with your situation, and I understand why you might feel the way you do. But Marcus and Riley lied to hospital staff. They violated our policies. There have to be consequences. Riley spoke up, her voice trembling but determined. What kind of consequences? Nancy consulted her clipboard again. Riley, as a hospital employee, you could face disciplinary action up to and including termination. Falsifying patient records is a serious offense. Marcus felt his world crashing down around him. Riley could lose her job because of their deception. She could lose her career, her livelihood, everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Wait, Marcus said desperately. This is all my fault. Riley was just trying to help me. If anyone should face consequences, it should be me. Nancy shook her head. Mr. Chen, while I appreciate your willingness to take responsibility, Riley is a trained medical professional. She knew the rules and chose to break them. The hospital has to maintain certain standards. Lena had been listening to this exchange with growing frustration. Finally, she couldn't contain herself any longer. Standards, she said with disgust. Let me tell you about standards, Nancy. The standard in my day was that families took care of each other no matter what. The standard was that when someone needed help, decent people stepped up to provide it. The standard was that love and loyalty mattered more than paperwork. Elena pointed at Riley. This young woman sacrificed her career to help my grandson be with me during the scariest night of my life. She has spent the last month helping us plan for my future, investing her own money in my dreams, becoming part of our family. Are the standards that matter to me. Mrs. Vasquez, Nancy began, but Elena wasn't finished. And you want to punish her for showing compassion? For doing what any decent human being would do in her situation? What kind of standards are those? Nancy looked uncomfortable, clearly torn between her professional duties and the emotional weight of Elena's words. Riley stepped forward. Nancy, I know I broke the rules. I knew I was breaking them when I did it. But I'd do it again without hesitation if it meant helping someone be with their family during a crisis. Even knowing it could cost you your job, Nancy asked. Even knowing it could cost me my job, Riley confirmed. Nancy was quiet for a long moment, looking back and forth between the three people in front of her. Finally, she sighed. This situation is complicated, Nancy admitted. On one hand, you clearly violated hospital policy. On the other hand, no harm was done to the patient, and your intentions were good. Marcus held his breath, waiting to hear what Nancy would decide. I'm going to need some time to think about how to handle this, Nancy continued. In the meantime, I need to ask all of you not to discuss this matter with anyone else at the hospital. After Nancy left, the three of them sat in Elena's kitchen in stunned silence. The euphoria of the previous night's emotional breakthrough had been replaced by the harsh reality of potential consequences. I'm so sorry, Marcus said to Riley. I never should have let you risk your career for me. Riley reached across the table and took his hand. Marcus, stop. I made my own choice. I knew the risks, and I decided it was worth it. But if you lose your job, then I'll find another one, Riley said firmly. There are other hospitals, other opportunities. But there's only one you, and only one Elena. I couldn't live with myself if I hadn't helped when you needed it. Elena had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. There might be another way to handle this situation. Marcus and Riley looked at her expectantly. What if we made it legal? Elena suggested. What is legal? Riley asked. Elena smiled. Your marriage. What if you two actually got married? Then retroactively, all of your claims to the hospital would be true. Marcus and Riley stared at Elena in shock. The idea was so simple and yet so radical that neither of them knew how to respond. Abuela, Marcus said slowly. That's a huge step. Riley and I just figured out that we love each other. Marriage is what people do when they love each other and want to build a life together, Elena interrupted. And from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what you two have been doing for the past month. Riley was quiet, clearly, overwhelmed by the suggestion. Finally, she spoke. Elena, I love Marcus, and I love you too. But I don't want him to feel pressured into marrying me just to solve a problem. That's not how marriages should start. Marcus looked at Riley, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, the fear that she wasn't worthy of a real commitment. It reminded him of his own fears, his own insecurities about deserving love and happiness. Riley, Marcus said softly, what if I told you that solving this problem isn't the reason I want to marry you? Riley's eyes widened. What? Marcus got up from his chair and knelt down beside Riley's seat, taking both of her hands in his. What if I told you that I've been thinking about marrying you since the second week we knew each other? What if I told you that watching you become part of our family has been the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced? Tears began to flow down Riley's cheeks. Marcus, ... What if I told you that you're the missing piece I didn't even know we needed? That you've made Elena happier than I've seen her in years? You've made me believe in the possibility of having a real family again? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Riley gasped. I bought this ring 2 days ago, Marcus said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. I was planning to propose this weekend, but I was terrified that you'd think it was too soon. or that you'd think I was only doing it because of our fake relationship. Lena clapped her hands together in delight. Marcus, you wonderful boy. Was crying openly now, staring at the ring in amazement. You bought this before Nancy showed up? Before we knew there might be consequences? I bought it because I love you, Marcus said simply. Because I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you've made us. Because I want to give. You, the family, you've always deserved. Marcus took a deep breath. Riley Thompson, will you marry me? Not to solve our problem, but because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me? Riley looked at Marcus, then at Alina, then back at Marcus. The room was completely silent, except for the sound of her quiet crying. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Marcus slipped the ring onto Riley's finger, and Alina burst into applause. The three of them embraced, laughing and crying at the same time. So Alina said when they finally separated, "When's the wedding?" Marcus and Riley looked at each other and started laughing. Tomorrow, Riley suggested. We could go to the courthouse, make it official, and then we wouldn't be lying to Nancy anymore. Tomorrow it is, Marcus agreed, as they began making plans for their impromptu wedding. Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 1 month. He had started with a fake wife and ended up with a real family. Sometimes he thought the best things in life happened when you were brave enough to take a risk for love. The next morning, Marcus, Riley, and Alina stood in the courthouse as a judge pronounced Marcus and Riley's husband and wife. Danny served as their witness, grinning broadly as his friend finally found the happiness he deserved. When Nancy returned to Elena's apartment the following week, she found a very different scene. Riley was no longer sleeping on the couch. She had moved into Marcus's apartment, and they were planning to find a larger place that could accommodate Alina as well. I have the marriage certificate, Riley said, handing Nancy the official document. Nancy examined it carefully. This is dated 3 days ago. Yes, Riley said calmly. We decided it was time to make our commitment official. Will be bike rider. Will may buy for what a why do we why I make men of waiter with the one we were greater. This seems awfully convenient, Alina spoke up. Nancy, does it matter when they got married? What matters is that they love each other. They're committed to each other, and they're building a life together. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be about? Nancy studied the three of them, Marcus with his arm around his new wife. Riley glowing with happiness, Alina beaming with pride at her new daughter-in-law. Finally, Nancy smiled. I suppose you're right, Mrs. Vasquez. The timing doesn't really matter. What matters is that love won. As Nancy left, Marcus pulled Riley close and kissed her. Their pretense had become reality, their deception had become truth, and their fake marriage had become the foundation of a real and lasting love. 6 months after their courthouse wedding, Marcus and Riley had settled into a rhythm that surprised them both with its naturalness. They had found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Southeast Portland that was large enough for Alina to have her own space when she wanted it. Though she maintained her independence in her own apartment most of the time, the morning light streamed through their kitchen window as Riley prepared for what would be the biggest day in Elena's new business venture. After months of planning, testing recipes, and building a client base, Elena's catering company, Boyla's Kitchen, was about to cater its first major event. A wedding reception for 150 guests. Marcus was loading trays of Elena's famous tresse, leches cake into their borrowed catering van when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his supervisor from the auto shop, Jimmy Sullivan. Marcus, I need to talk to you. Jimmy's gruff voice came through the speaker. Can you come in early today? Marcus felt a familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. Jimmy's tone was serious, and early morning calls usually meant bad news. Is everything okay, Jimmy? Just get here as soon as you can? Marcus hung up and looked at Riley, who had been listening to the conversation while organizing Elena's catering supplies. Go, Riley said before he could speak. Elena and I can handle the final preparations. We've got this. Are you sure? Today's huge for her business. Riley kissed him quickly. I'm sure. Besides, Elena's been running kitchens longer than either of us has been alive. She doesn't need us hovering. 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself sitting across from Jimmy in the cluttered office of Sullivan's Auto Repair. Jimmy was a burly man in his 60s who had owned the shop for over 30 years. He had given Marcus a chance when other employers saw only a young man without a college degree, and Marcus owed him more than he could ever repay. Marcus, Jimmy began, leaning back in his creaky office chair, you've been with me for almost 5 years now? Yes, sir. In that time, you've proven yourself to be one of the most reliable mechanics I've ever employed. You're honest, hardworking, and the customers trust you. Marcus waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. Jimmy pulled out a manila folder and set it on the desk between them. I'm retiring, son. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Jimmy had been more than just a boss. He had been a mentor, almost a father figure. The idea of the shop without Jimmy was unthinkable. Jimmy, let me finish, Jimmy said, holding up his hand. My wife has been after me to retire for years, and my doctor says my blood pressure isn't getting any better with the stress of running this place. It's time. Marcus felt his world shifting again, just as it had 6 months earlier in the hospital. What happened to the shop? What happens to the rest of us? Jimmy smiled for the first time since Marcus had arrived. That depends on you. On me? Jimmy opened the manila folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I want to sell the shop. To you, Marcus? I want you to take over Sullivan's Auto Repair. Marcus stared at Jimmy in shock. I can't afford to buy a business, Jimmy. I barely have any savings. I'm not talking about a traditional sale, Jimmy explained. I'm talking about owner financing. You'd take over the day-to-day operations immediately, and you'd pay me a percentage of the profits over the next 10 years. By the time you're done paying me off, the shop would be completely yours. Marcus felt dizzy. The offer was beyond anything he had ever dreamed of. Why me? Because you care about this place the way I do. Because you treat every car that comes through here like it belongs to your own family. Because I've watched you grow from a scared kid into a man I'm proud to call my friend. And because I've seen how you've handled the challenges in your personal life these past few months. The way you took care of your grandmother. The way you found love with Riley. The way you've supported Elena's new business that shows character, son. Shows the kind of person I want carrying on my legacy. Marcus's mind was racing. Owning the shop would mean financial security for his family. It would mean being able to support Elena's catering business more substantially. It would mean building something lasting, but it also meant enormous responsibility and risk. I need to talk to Riley and Elena, Marcus said. Of course you do, Jimmy agreed. Take the papers home, discuss it with your family, and let me know what you decide. But Marcus, yeah, really hope you say yes. This place needs someone who loves it as much as you do. Marcus drove home in a daze, the folder of legal documents sitting on the passenger seat, like a roadmap to a future he had never imagined possible. When he arrived at their apartment, he found Riley and Elena in full catering mode, the kitchen transformed into a professional food preparation station. How did it go with Jimmy? Riley asked, not looking up from the elaborate fruit display. She was arranging. He wants to sell me the shop, Marcus said quietly. Both women stopped what they were doing and stared at him. What? Elena said, flour dusting her apron. Marcus explained Jimmy's offer, watching as Riley's expression shifted. From surprise to excitement to concern. This is incredible, Marcus, Riley said when he finished. But can we afford it? The payments would be manageable, Marcus said, consulting the papers Jimmy had given him. Actually, they'd be less than what we're paying in rent right now. Lena wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to Marcus. Mijo, this is what you've always wanted, isn't it? To have your own business? Marcus nodded. I just never thought it was possible. I never imagined someone would give me a chance like this. Then what's the problem? Alina asked. Marcus looked at his wife and grandmother, these two women who had become his anchor in the world. What if I fail? What if I mess it up and we lose everything? Riley took his hands in hers, leaving small traces of fruit juice on his fingers. Marcus, do you remember what you told me the night we met? You said you'd always fight for the people you love. Yeah, now you're fighting for our future. For Elena's dreams, for my dreams, for your own dreams. You're not going to fail because you're not fighting alone. Alina nodded enthusiastically. Riley's right, mijo. We're a team now. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed. When one of us struggles, we all help carry the load. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes. 6 months ago, he had been a single man working for someone else, barely scraping by. Now he had a wife who believed in him, a grandmother whose business was thriving, and an opportunity to build something meaningful. Okay, he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Let's do it. Riley threw her arms around him, and Alina cheered. In the middle of their celebration, the timer for Elena's empanadas went off, reminding them that they still had a wedding reception to cater. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Marcus helped load the van with Elena's carefully prepared dishes while Riley organized the serving equipment and decorations. Alina directed the operation with the precision of a military commander, her years of experience in commercial kitchens evident in every decision. The wedding reception was being held at a historic mansion in the West Hills when they arrived. Marcus was struck by the elegance of the venue. Tall windows overlooked the city. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished hardwood floors, and fresh flowers adorned every surface. This is beautiful, Riley whispered as they began setting up the catering station. Alina was already in her element, directing the venue's staff with confidence and charm. Marcus watched in amazement as his grandmother transformed from the frail woman he had worried about in the hospital to this vibrant businesswoman who commanded respect from everyone around her. Your grandmother is incredible, said a voice behind him. Marcus turned to see a well-dressed woman in her 40s approaching him. She had short blonde hair and kind eyes, and she was wearing what was obviously an expensive suit. I'm Caroline Henderson, the woman said, extending her hand. I'm the event coordinator here at the mansion, Marcus Cheney replied, shaking her hand. Elena's grandson. I have to tell you, we've worked with dozens of caterers over the years, and your grandmother is exceptional. The food is outstanding, but more than that, she has this warmth that makes everyone feel welcome. Marcus glanced over at Alina, who was laughing with the bride's mother while arranging appetizers on silver platters. She's always been like that. She has a gift for making people feel like family. Caroline smiled. Speaking of which, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? We're always looking for preferred vendors to recommend to our clients. Based on what I've seen today, I'd like to put Elena's company on our preferred caterers list. We host about 50 events a year, everything from weddings to corporate gatherings to charity galas. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. 50 events? A year would transform Elena's small catering business into a major operation that would be incredible for her business. There's just one challenge, Carolyn continued. To be on our preferred vendor list, caterers need to be able to handle events of varying sizes on short notice. That requires reliable transportation, professional equipment, and sometimes additional staff. Most small catering companies struggle with those requirements, Marcus understood immediately. Elena's current setup was perfect for small events, but scaling up would require significant investment in equipment and infrastructure. How much lead time would you typically give for events? Marcus asked. Anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, depending on the circumstances. We'd start Alina off with smaller events and work up to the larger ones as she proves her capacity. Marcus thanked Caroline for the information and spent the rest of the evening thinking about the possibilities. If Alina could land this contract, her business would be set for years to come. But it would also require expanding faster than they had. Originally planned, the wedding reception was a tremendous success. The guests raved about Elena's food. Several people asked for her business card, and the bride's family insisted on taking photos with Elena before the evening ended, as they packed up the van at the end of the night. Elena was glowing with pride and exhaustion. How did we do? Alina asked, as they loaded the last of the serving dishes. Better than we ever imagined, Riley said, showing Alina a stack of business cards from potential new clients. Marcus pulled. Alina sighed as Riley secured the equipment in the van. Abuela, I need to tell you about a conversation I had tonight.
Hey.
Explained Caroline's offer and the requirements that would come with it. Alina listened intently, asking smart questions about timelines and logistics. So what do you think? Marcus asked when he finished. Alina was quiet for a moment, looking out over the city lights of Portland. I think, she said slowly, that sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we're ready for it. What do you mean? Alina smiled. You buying Jimmy's shop means you'll have steady income and flexibility with your schedule? Riley's nursing salary provides security. My catering business is growing. We're not the same people we were 6 months ago, mijo. We're stronger now. We're ready for bigger challenges. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? We fail and have to start over? We've all started over before. The difference is, this time, we won't be starting over alone. Marcus felt a surge of love for this remarkable woman who had taught him that family wasn't just about blood relations. It was about the people who showed up for each other, no matter what. So we're really doing this? Marcus asked. The shop, the catering expansion, all of it? We're really doing this, Alina confirmed, as they drove home through the quiet Portland streets. Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed since that terrifying night in the hospital. What had started as a desperate deception had become the foundation for something real and beautiful. Riley reached over and squeezed his hand. Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about how lucky we are, Marcus said. Lucky? Riley laughed. Marcus, we've worked incredibly hard for everything we have. True, Marcus agreed. But we're also lucky that we found each other. Lucky that Alina got sick at just the right time for us to meet. Lucky that we were brave enough to take risks for love, Lena spoke up from the back seat. There's no such thing as luck, mijo. There's only love, courage, and the willingness to fight for what matters most. As they pulled into their apartment complex, Marcus knew she was right. They hadn't gotten lucky. They had created their own luck by choosing to love each other, by choosing to take risks, and by choosing to build something meaningful together. The pretense that had brought them together was long gone, but the reality they had built in its place was stronger than anything Marcus had ever imagined possible. 1 year after Marcus had first pretended Riley was his wife, their lives had transformed beyond recognition. Marcus now owned Chun's Auto Repair. He had renamed it after taking over from Jimmy. Elena's catering business was thriving with the mansion contract, and Riley had been promoted to charge nurse on her floor at St. Mary's General. But success, as they were about to learn, brought challenges they hadn't anticipated. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Marcus was under the hood of a vintage Mustang. His newest employee, a young mechanic named Tony Reeves, answered the phone in the office. Boss, Tony called out, his voice tight with concern. You need to take this call. It's about Alina. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and hurried to the phone, his heart already racing. This is Marcus.
Oh, Mr. Chen.
This is Dr. Patricia Wu from Portland General Hospital. Your grandmother was brought to our emergency department about an hour ago. Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. What happened? She okay? She collapsed while catering an event at the university. We're still running tests, but it appears she may have had another cardiac episode. She's stable now, but we'd like to keep her for observation. Marcus was already grabbing his keys. I'll be right there. Mr. Chen, there's one more thing. When the paramedics brought her in, she was asking for her daughter-in-law Riley. Is that your wife? For a moment, Marcus was confused. Then he realized Alina had been talking about Riley as her daughter-in-law, not knowing that the hospital staff would interpret that as meaning Riley was Marcus's wife through a traditional family structure. Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. Riley is my wife. As Marcus drove to Portland General, he called Riley at St. Mary's. She immediately requested emergency leave and met him in the parking lot, still wearing her scrubs. What did the doctor say? Riley asked as they hurried toward the emergency. Department, another cardiac episode, but she's stable. Riley, there's something else. Elena's been telling people you're her daughter-in-law, and the hospital staff assumes that means that we're actually married, Riley finished. Which we are, right? But they don't know about our history. They think we're just a normal married couple. Riley stopped walking. Marcus, we are a normal married couple. What happened to us in the beginning doesn't change what we are now. Marcus looked at his wife, struck once again by her ability to cut through complexity and find the truth at the center of things. She was right. They weren't pretending anymore. They hadn't been pretending for months. When they reached Elena's room, they found her sitting up in bed, looking frustrated and embarrassed. "I'm fine," she insisted, before either of them could speak. "This is all unnecessary drama." "Abuela, you collapsed," Marcus said, taking her hand. "That's not nothing." Dr. Wu entered the room, a petite woman with short black hair and a gentle demeanor. "Mrs. Vasquez, how are you feeling?" "Like everyone is making a big fuss over nothing," Elena replied stubbornly. Dr. Wu smiled. "I understand your frustration, but I'm afraid this isn't nothing." "How?" "Your EKG shows some irregularities that concern me. I'd like Dr. Harrison from cardiology to take a look." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Dr. Harrison was the cardiologist who had treated Elena during her first heart attack at St. Mary's. If they were calling him in, the situation was serious. "How long will that take?" Riley asked. "He should be here within the hour. In the meantime, we'll continue monitoring her heart, rhythm, and blood pressure." After Dr. Wu left, Elena looked at Marcus and Riley with an expression they had never seen before. Genuine fear. "What if this time is different?" Elena asked quietly. "What if this is the beginning of the end?" Riley moved closer to Elena's bed. "Elena, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. I'm 16 years old, Mia. I've had 2 heart attacks in a year. At some point, my body is going to give out." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. The idea of losing Elena was unthinkable. She was the foundation of everything good in his life. "You're not going anywhere," Marcus said firmly. "We won't let you." Elena smiled sadly. "Oh, my sweet boy. Some things are beyond our control." Over the next few hours, they waited for Dr. Harrison's assessment. Riley used her medical knowledge to interpret the monitors and explain Elena's vital signs to Marcus. While Elena dozed fitfully between visits from various medical staff, when Dr. Harrison finally arrived, Marcus was surprised to see Nancy, the head nurse from St. Mary's, accompanying him. She smiled warmly when she saw Marcus and Riley. "I heard Elena was here," Nancy said, "but Dr. Harrison asked me to assist with her case since I'm familiar with her medical history." Dr. Harrison examined Elena thoroughly, reviewing her test results and asking detailed questions about her symptoms. Finally, he sat down to discuss his findings. "Mrs. Vasquez, the good news is that you haven't had another heart attack. However, you are experiencing atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat that can be serious if left untreated." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means Elena's heart isn't beating in a regular rhythm. This can cause fatigue, shortness of breath, and in some cases, fainting. The collapse at the university was likely caused by a particularly severe episode." Riley leaned forward. "What are the treatment options?" Dr. Harrison consulted his notes. "We have several approaches we can try. Medication to regulate her heart rhythm, lifestyle modifications, and in some cases, a minor surgical procedure to correct the electrical signals in the heart." Elena had been listening quietly to this discussion. Now she spoke up. "I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Of course, how much time do I have? And please, don't sugarcoat it. I'm a grown woman, and I deserve to know the truth." Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Vasquez, with proper treatment and lifestyle modifications, people with atrial fibrillation can live normal, healthy lives for many years. However, your age and the fact that you've already had 1 heart attack do put you at higher risk." "For complications, how much higher?" Elena pressed. "If you follow our treatment plan religiously, avoid stress, and take your medications as prescribed, I see no reason why you couldn't have many more productive years. But if you ignore the warning signs, If you continue to push yourself the way you have been, then yes, you could be looking at months rather than years. The room fell silent as the weight of Dr. Harrison's words settled over them. Alina finally spoke. So the question is whether I want to live carefully or live fully. Abuela, Marcus said, alarm in his voice. That's not the choice, isn't it? Alina asked. Doctor, if I continue running my catering business, working the long hours, dealing with the stress of a growing company, what are my chances?
Dr. Harrison
Hesitated Sveskis. Stress is one of the major triggers for atrial fibrillation episodes. If you continue with high-stress activities without modification, you're significantly increasing your risk of serious complications. Alina nodded as if this confirmed what she had already suspected. And if I retire, live quietly, take my medications, and avoid excitement, your prognosis would be much better, Dr. Harrison admitted. Alina looked at Marcus and Riley, and they could see her making a decision that would change everything. And I guess we need to talk about the future of Abuela's kitchen. The drive home from the hospital was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Alina had been discharged with a new set of medications and strict instructions to avoid stress and overexertion. The implications for her catering business were clear. She couldn't continue operating at the level she had been. That evening, they sat around the kitchen table in Marcus and Riley's apartment, surrounded by the business plans and contracts that represented Elena's dreams. We have 3 major events scheduled for next month, Elena said, consulting her. Calendar, the Morrison wedding, the law firm's annual dinner, and the charity gala at the mansion. We'll cancel them, Marcus said immediately. Absolutely not, Alina replied firmly. These people are counting on us. We're not going to let them down. Riley had been quiet throughout this discussion, but now she spoke up. What if we didn't? Cancel them? What if we found another way? Marcus and Alina looked at her expectantly. Alina, you're the heart and soul of this business. Your recipes, your vision, your warmth. That's what makes Abuela's kitchen special. But the physical demands of catering, the stress of managing events, the long hours on your feet, those are things that other people can handle. What are you suggesting? Alina asked. Riley took a deep breath. What if we expanded the team? What if we hired experienced catering staff to handle the physical work while you focused on the creative and supervisory aspects? Marcus felt a spark of hope that could work. You could still be involved in menu planning, food preparation, oversight, quality control, but not the actual execution, Elena said thoughtfully.
Yeah?
I would become more of a consultant than a hands-on caterer. Exactly, Riley said. You could work from home most of the time. Taste test dishes, train new staff, develop new recipes. The things you love about the business without the things that are dangerous for your health. Elena was quiet for a long time, considering this proposal. Finally, she smiled. Oh, there's something appealing about the idea of being the mastermind behind the operation rather than the workhorse. It would mean hiring several new people, Marcus said. The costs would be significant. But the mansion contract is generating enough revenue to support additional staff, Riley pointed out. And if Elena's health improves, the business could actually grow faster with a larger team. Elena looked at the 2 people who had become her world. You would really do this? Restructure the entire business to accommodate an old woman's health problems. You're not just an old woman, Marcus said fiercely. You're the reason this business exists. You're the reason Riley and I met. You're the reason we have the life we have. If we have to change everything to keep you healthy and happy, then that's what we'll do. Riley nodded in agreement. Besides, this isn't just about accommodating your health issues. This is about building something sustainable, something that can grow and thrive for years to come. Alina wiped tears from her eyes. All right then, let's do it. Right. But I have conditions. Name them, Marcus said. First, any new staff members have to understand that Abuela's kitchen isn't just about food. It's about making people feel loved and welcomed. I won't compromise on that, agreed Riley said. Second, I want to be involved in training everyone personally. If they're going to represent my vision, they need to understand what that vision is. Of course, Marcus said. And third, Alina continued, her voice becoming stronger, I want to expand our mission. I've been thinking about this for weeks. What if, in addition to private catering, we started a program to provide meals for elderly people who can't cook for themselves? What if we partnered with community organizations to feed people who are struggling? Marcus and Riley exchanged glances. Elena's proposal would add another layer of complexity to the business, but it was exactly the kind of idea that made her special. That's beautiful, Abuela, Marcus said. But wouldn't that add stress? Elena shook her head. It would add purpose. There's a difference. Stress comes from doing things you don't want to do or things that don't matter. Purpose comes from doing work that makes the world a better place. Riley smiled. Then let's make the world a better place. Over the next few weeks, they threw themselves into restructuring Abuela's kitchen. Marcus handled the business side, using skills he had developed running the auto shop. Riley coordinated schedules and logistics, drawing on her experience managing nursing teams. Elena focused on hiring and training new staff, ensuring that each new employee understood the company's values. The first new hire was Maria Santos, an experienced chef who had worked in restaurant kitchens for 15 years. She was a single mother, looking for more stable hours, and Elena immediately recognized her potential. Cooking is about more than following recipes, Elena explained to Maria during her first training session. It's about putting love into every dish. When someone eats food you've prepared, they should feel cared for. Maria nodded, watching carefully as Elena demonstrated her technique for making the perfect mole sauce. My grandmother used to say the same thing. She said you could taste the cook's mood in the food. Your grandmother was a wise woman, Elena said approvingly. The second hire was James Patterson, a young man fresh out of culinary school who brought enthusiasm and modern techniques to complement Elena's traditional approach. The third was Lisa Chen, no relation to Marcus, an event coordinator with experience in high-end catering, who could handle the logistics that had been overwhelming Elena. By the time of the Morrison wedding, Abuela's kitchen had transformed from a one-woman operation into a professional catering team. Elena oversaw the food preparation for Marcus and Riley's apartment, while her new staff handled the on-site execution. The event was a tremendous success. The food was flawless, the service was impeccable, and most importantly, Elena had been able to participate without compromising her health. How do you feel? Riley asked Elena as they cleaned up after reviewing the team's performance that evening. Elena smiled. I feel like we've built something that's bigger than any one of us, something that can outlast all of us. Marcus looked around their apartment, which had become the unofficial headquarters of a growing business empire. Elena's catering company was thriving, his auto shop was profitable, and Riley was excelling in her nursing career, but more than their professional success. What struck him was the family they had created, not through blood or law, but through choice and commitment and love. You know what the best part is? Marcus said. What? Riley asked. Marcus smiled. We're not pretending anymore. This is real, all of it. Lena raised her glass of tea in a toast. To make it real, Marcus and Riley echoed. They clinked their glasses together in celebration of the life they had built from nothing more than a moment of desperate compassion in a hospital corridor, 18 months after. Their courthouse wedding, Marcus and Riley had established a comfortable routine. Their Tuesday evening dinners at Elena's apartment had become sacred family time, a tradition that anchored their increasingly busy lives. Tonight, however, Elena seemed distracted, picking at her Aras con Pao and glancing frequently at her phone. Abuela. What's wrong? Marcus asked, noticing her unusual behavior. You've barely eaten anything. Elena set down her fork and took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you both. Something I've been keeping from you. Riley and Marcus exchanged concerned glances. Elena had been healthy for months, following her treatment plan religiously and managing her catering business with her new team. They thought they had left medical crises behind them. You feeling sick again? Riley asked, immediately shifting into nurse mode. No, it's nothing like that, Elena said quickly. It's about family. About my family. Marcus felt confused. Elena rarely talked about her relatives beyond stories of her late husband. He'd always assumed she had no clothes. Family left. I have a daughter, Elena said quietly. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus stared at his grandmother in shock,
What?
He managed to say, Elena's eyes filled with tears. Her name is Carmen. She's 53 years old, and she lives in Phoenix. She's been trying to reach me for months, but I was too scared. To call her back? Riley reached across the table and took Elena's hand. Elena, why didn't you tell us you had a daughter? Because I haven't spoken to her in 25 years, Elena admitted, her voice breaking. We had a terrible fight when she was in her 20s about her choice of husband, about her life decisions. I said things I shouldn't have said. She said things that broke my heart. We were both too proud to apologize. Marcus felt like the ground was shifting beneath him again. But why now? Why is she trying to contact you now? Elena pulled out her phone and showed them a series of missed calls and text messages. Her daughter, my granddaughter, is getting married next month. Carmen wants me to be there. She wants to ... reconcile. Riley read through some of the messages, her expression softening. Elena, these messages are beautiful. She says she's sorry, that she's missed you, that she wants her daughter to know her grandmother. I know, Elena whispered, but what if it's too late? What if we've hurt each other too much? What if seeing her again just opens old wounds? Marcus tried to process this revelation. Elena had a daughter. He had an aunt he'd never met. There was family out there that he'd never known existed. Have you responded to any of her messages? Marcus asked. Elena shook her head. I've written a dozen replies and deleted them all. I don't know what to say. Riley squeezed Elena's hand. What do you want to say? Elena was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her cheeks. I want to say that I'm sorry. I've thought about her every day for 25 years. I've wondered about her life, her happiness, her children. That losing my grandson's parents in that car accident made me realize how precious family is, how quickly we can lose the people we love. Then say that, Riley said simply. But what if she doesn't forgive me? What if she's only reaching out because of the wedding, and after that, she goes back to not wanting me in her life? Marcus had been listening to this conversation with growing emotion. The parallels between Elena's situation and his own relationship with her were striking. Elena had taken in a broken child and loved him unconditionally. Family, when he had none. Now she was afraid of being rejected by her own daughter. Abuela, Marcus said gently. Do you remember what you told me when I was 12 and I got in trouble at school for fighting? Elena smiled through her tears. Told you that brave people aren't the ones who never fall down? Brave people are the ones who get back up. And what did you tell me about family? That family means showing up even when it's hard, even when you're scared. Marcus nodded. So what would you tell me to do if I were in your situation? Elena looked at Marcus with pride and love. I would tell you to be brave. I would tell you to show up. That evening, Elena composed a simple message to her daughter. Carmen, I've missed you every day for 25 years. I would love to come to your daughter's wedding if you'll have me. I have so much to tell you and so much to apologize for. With all my love, Mama. Carmen's response came within an hour. Mama, I've been waiting for this message my whole adult life. Please come. We have a lot to catch up on. I love you.
The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity.
Elena would be flying to Phoenix for the wedding, and after much discussion, Marcus and Riley decided to accompany her. It would be their first trip together as a family, and their first time meeting Carmen and her family. Elena was a bundle of nerves as the departure date approached. She changed her outfit 3 times, worried about what gifts to bring, and asked Riley and Marcus repeatedly if they thought Carmen would like them. She's going to love you, Riley assured her for the 100th time. How could she not? The flight to Phoenix was Elena's first time on an airplane in over a decade. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand during takeoff, while Riley entertained her with stories from the hospital to distract her from her anxiety. When they landed, Marcus spotted a woman who could only be Carmen waiting near the baggage claim. She had Elena's eyes and smile, though her hair was streaked with silver, and her face showed the lines of middle age. Beside her stood a young woman in her 20s, who was obviously the bride-to-be. Mama, Carmen called out, her voice breaking. With emotion, Elena dropped her carry-on bag and rushed toward her daughter. They embraced in the middle of the busy airport, both women crying openly as 25 years of separation melted away. I'm so sorry, Elena whispered. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, Mama, Carmen replied. We lost so much time. Marcus felt his own eyes filling with tears as he watched the reunion. Riley slipped her hand into his, and he squeezed it gratefully. After several minutes, Alina and Carmen separated, both wiping their eyes and laughing at their emotional display. Carmen, Alina said, turning to Marcus and Riley, I want you to meet my grandson Marcus and his wife Riley. They're the most important people in my life. Carmen smiled warmly and extended her hand to Marcus. So you're the famous Marcus I've been hearing about. Mama's told me so much about you in her messages. She never told us about you, Marcus said honestly, then immediately regretted his bluntness. But Carmen laughed. That sounds like Mama. She always was stubborn about keeping her secrets. The young woman beside Carmen stepped forward. Hi, I'm Sophia, Carmen's daughter. I can't believe I'm finally meeting my grandmother and my uncle. Marcus realized that this woman was technically his cousin, even though they were close to the same age. I guess I'm your uncle. That's going to take some getting used to. Over. The next few days, they learned about the life Alina had missed. Carmen had become a successful real estate agent, married a kind man named Robert, raised 2 children, Sophia, who was getting married, and a son named David who lived in California. Alina listened with rapt attention as Carmen shared stories about her children's childhoods, their accomplishments, their challenges. She looked at photo albums spanning decades, seeing her grandchildren grow up in snapshots. I can't believe how much I missed, Alina said sadly as they sat in Carmen's living room the night before the wedding. But look at what you built, Carmen replied, gesturing toward Marcus and Riley. You saved this young man's life. You gave him a family. You raised him to be the kind of person who would marry someone as wonderful as Riley. Carmen turned to Riley, and you, from what Mama tells me, you risked your career to help Marcus be with her when she was sick. That's the kind of love I want Sophia to have in her marriage. Riley blushed. I just did what felt right. That's exactly what I mean, Carmen said. What felt right, not what was easy or safe. That's real love. The wedding day dawned. Bright and clear, with the ceremony taking place in Carmen's backyard under a canopy of desert flowers. Alina had insisted on helping with the catering, working alongside the hired professionals to ensure that some of her traditional recipes were included in the reception meal, as Sophia walked down the aisle in her grandmother's wedding dress. A gown Alina had saved for 50 years, Marcus watched Alina's face light up with joy. She was seeing her granddaughter get married, participating in a family celebration she had never dared to hope for. During the reception, Alina gave a toast that left everyone in tears. She spoke about the power of forgiveness, the importance of family, and the way love could bridge any gap if people were brave enough to reach across it. I missed 25 years of my daughter's life because I was too proud to say I was sorry, Alina said, raising her glass. But I learned something important from my grandson and his beautiful wife. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is show up for the people we love, even when it's scary, even when we don't know what will happen. Alina looked directly at Sophia and her new husband. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. It's showing up for each other when things are hard. It's being brave enough to be vulnerable. It's putting the other person's happiness before your own pride. As the celebration continued into the evening, Marcus found himself talking with David, Carmen's son who had flown in from Los Angeles for the wedding. It's incredible what you did for our grandmother, David said. Taking care of her, helping her start her business, becoming her family. Marcus shook his head. She's the one who took care of me. She saved my life long before I ever had a chance. To help her? David smiled. That's what Carmen said you'd say. She said Mama always had a gift for taking in strays and making them feel like they belonged. Is that what I am? A stray? We all are in a way, David replied. Family isn't really about blood, is it? It's about the people who choose to love you, who choose to show up for you, who choose to make you part of their story. Marcus looked across the dance floor where Riley was dancing with Alina, while Carmen and Sophia danced nearby. For generations of women connected by love rather than just genetics? You're right, Marcus said. Family is about choice. The last night of their trip, Carmen pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. They sat on her back patio under the stars at the house, quiet after the excitement of the wedding. "I need to thank you," Carmen said. "For what?" "That. For giving my mother a reason to forgive me." Marcus looked confused. "I don't understand." Carmen smiled. "When Mama took you in after your parents died, she learned what it meant to be a parent again. She learned how to love unconditionally, how to put someone else's needs first. It's how to be the kind of mother she wished she had been. To me," Carmen paused, choosing her words carefully, "if she hadn't had you to love and worry about, if she hadn't experienced that kind of pure parental devotion, I don't think she would have been ready to forgive me. You taught her how to be the mother I needed her to be." Marcus felt tears building in his eyes. "She was always that mother, Carmen. Just both forgot how to see it." "Maybe," Carmen agreed, "but you reminded her. And now, because of you, I have my mother back. My children have their grandmother. Our family is whole again." On the flight home to Portland, Alina was quiet, processing everything that had happened. As they descended toward PDX, she finally spoke. "I keep thinking about what David said at the wedding," Alina said, "about family being a choice." "What about it?" Riley asked. Alina smiled. "Chose you too, and you chose me. But until this week, I never really understood that Carmen chose me too. All those years ago when she reached out, she chose to forgive me. She chose to try again." Alina took both of their hands. "Choice is what makes family real, not blood, not law, not circumstances. Choice. The daily decision to love someone, to show up for them, to put their happiness alongside your own." Marcus squeezed his grandmother's hand. "Then we're the luckiest family in the world." "Why?" Alina asked. "Because we keep choosing each other every single day." As their plane touched down in Portland, Marcus reflected on how their family had grown. What had started as a desperate deception in a hospital corridor had become something larger and more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. They weren't just pretending to be a family anymore. They weren't even just choosing to be a family. They had become something rarer and more precious. A family that had been tested, expanded, strengthened by every challenge they had faced together. And the best part was, Marcus thought as they walked through the familiar halls of PDX, their story was far from over. 2 years after their return from Phoenix, Marcus stood in the hallway of St. Mary's General Hospital, holding a small bundle wrapped in a soft pink blanket. The irony wasn't lost on him. This was the same hospital where he had first met Riley, where their elaborate deception had begun. And now, where their daughter had just been born, Riley was resting in the maternity ward, exhausted but glowing. With happiness after 12 hours of labor, Alina sat beside the hospital bed, tears of joy streaming down her face as she held her newest granddaughter for the first time. "She has your eyes, Mia," Alina whispered to Riley, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "And Marcus's stubborn chin," Riley replied with a tired laugh. Marcus couldn't stop staring at his daughter. Isabella Alina Chen, named for Alina and Jet, Riley's mother, who had died when Riley was 16. She was perfect. God. From her tiny fingers to the way she seemed to study the world around her with serious dark eyes. A soft knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Dr. Harrison entered, by Nancy, who was now the hospital's director of patient services. "Congratulations," Dr. Harrison said warmly. "I hear we have a new addition to the Chen family." Nancy smiled at the sight of the baby. "She's beautiful." "How are you feeling, Riley?" "Tired but wonderful," Riley replied. "Dr. Harrison, Nancy, I want you both to meet Isabella," as they admired. The baby Nancy's expression grew thoughtful. "I've been thinking about your family a lot lately, about how we first met, about everything that's happened since then." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Even though their marriage was completely real now, he sometimes worried that someone would discover the unconventional way it had started. 3 years ago, Nancy continued, "You two taught me something important about what family really means. About the difference between following rules and doing what's right." Alina looked up from the baby with interest. "What do you mean, dear?" Nancy pulled up a chair beside the bed. "After your case, I started paying attention to how many people were being kept away from their loved ones because of technicalities? How many real relationships were being dismissed because they didn't fit into neat legal categories? She paused, looking at Marcus and Riley. I started advocating for policy changes, more flexible definitions of family, clearer processes for emergency situations, better training for staff about compassionate care. Marcus was surprised. You did that because of us? Because of all of you? Nancy corrected. Alina, your story about being kept from your husband's bedside resonated with a lot of people. The hospital administration realized we needed to do better. Dr. Harrison nodded. Nancy's advocacy led to significant changes in how we handle family. Access policies. We've helped dozens of families in situations similar to yours. Riley shifted Isabella to her other arm, looking moved by this revelation. So our little deception actually helped other people? Your love helped other people? Alina corrected gently. The deception was just the vehicle. As if summoned by the mention of love, the door opened again and Carmen entered, carrying a large bouquet of flowers and wearing a huge smile. Where is my newest granddaughter? Carmen announced, having driven up from Phoenix the moment she got word that Riley was in labor. The room filled with warmth and laughter as Carmen was introduced to Isabella. Marcus marveled at how natural it felt to have Carmen there, how seamlessly she had integrated into their family over the past 2 years. Have you called David and Sophia? Carmen asked, taking photos of Alina holding the baby. They're flying. In tomorrow, Marcus replied. Sophia's bringing her new baby too. Isabella will have a cousin just 3 months older than her. Riley smiled at the thought. Their family had grown exponentially since that trip to Phoenix. David had moved back to Arizona to be closer to Carmen. Sophia and her husband had bought a house just minutes from Carmen's. The extended family had become a source of constant joy and support. And what about the businesses? Carmen asked. How are you managing everything with a new baby? Marcus and Riley exchanged a glance. They had made some major decisions in preparation for Isabella's arrival. We've restructured things quite a bit, Riley explained. I'm taking a year off from nursing to be home with Isabella. Marcus has promoted Tony to assistant manager at the shop, so he has more flexibility. And Elena's catering company is practically running itself now, Marcus added. Maria has become the head chef. James handles all the creative menu development, and Lisa manages the business side. Elena consults and taste tests from home. Elena beamed with pride. The community meal program is feeding over 200 elderly residents each week now. We've expanded to 3 different neighborhoods. Dr. Harrison looked impressed. Remarkable. You've built something that's making a real difference in the community. You've built something that will outlast all of us, Elena said, looking around the room at her family. And that's the point, isn't it? To create something beautiful that continues after we're gone. As the afternoon wore on, friends and colleagues stopped by to meet Isabella. Danny arrived with his wife and 2 young children, marveling at how much Marcus's life had changed since he was a single guy working at the garage. Jimmy came by with his wife, proud of what Marcus had accomplished with the auto shop, and delighted to meet the newest member of the Chen family. Maria James and Lisa from Abuela's kitchen brought a feast of Elena's specialties, transforming the sterile hospital room into a celebration. Even some of Riley's former colleagues from her floor stopped by during their breaks. Curious to meet the baby they had been hearing so much about, as evening approached and the visitors began to leave, Marcus found himself alone with Riley, Alina, and Isabella. The baby was sleeping peacefully in Riley's arms, completely unaware of the love surrounding her. I can't believe she's real, Marcus said softly, reaching out to touch Isabella's cheek. Believe it, Riley said with a smile. She's as real as everything else we've built together. Alina had been quietly observing this interaction, and now she spoke up. Marcus, do you remember what you were thinking about that first night in the hospital when Riley helped you see me? Marcus thought back to that terrifying evening when he had been so desperate to be with Alina during her crisis. I was thinking about how unfair it was that bureaucracy could keep families apart. I was thinking about how grateful I was to have someone help me fight for what mattered. And what matters most to you now? Alina asked. Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, his wife, his grandmother. This, all of this. The family we've created, the life we've built, the love we've chosen to share. Riley shifted slightly in the bed, careful not to wake Isabella. Alina, what about you? When you look at everything that's happened, what do you think about? Alina was quiet for a moment, her eyes reflecting the soft light from the hospital room lamp. I think about the night I collapsed at the grocery store. How scared I was. How alone I felt. I thought I was going to die without ever seeing you again, Marcus. She paused, reaching out to touch both Marcus and Riley. But instead of losing everything, I gained a daughter. Instead of the end of my story, it was the beginning of our story. Lena looked at Isabella with infinite tenderness. Little girl gets to grow up knowing that love isn't limited by blood or law or convention. She gets to grow up in a family that chose each other, that fought for each other, that never gave up on each other. Marcus felt tears building in his eyes. Do you think she'll understand how special that is? She'll understand because we'll show her, Riley said confidently. Every day, we'll show her what it means to choose love over fear, courage over comfort, family over everything else. As if responding to her mother's voice, Isabella stirred in Riley's arms. Opening her dark eyes and looking around the room with the same serious expression she had worn since birth. "Hello, beautiful girl," Alina whispered. "Welcome to the most wonderful, complicated, imperfect, amazing family in the world." Isabella seemed to focus on Elena's voice, and for a moment Marcus could swear his daughter smiled. "She knows," Marcus said with wonder. "She knows she's loved." "Of course she knows," Alina replied. "Love like this is impossible to hide." The next morning brought discharge papers and the surreal experience of leaving the hospital with their daughter. As Marcus carefully installed the car seat and Riley settled Isabella for her first car ride, he looked back at the imposing facade of St. Mary's General Hospital. "Feeling nostalgic?" Riley asked, noticing his gaze. "Just thinking about how everything started here," Marcus replied. "How a moment of desperation led to all of this." Riley smiled. "It wasn't desperation that led to this, Marcus. It was love. Your love for Alina, her love for you, my choice to help someone who needed it, everything else grew from that." As they drove home to introduce Isabella to her nursery, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. Had begun as a panicked deception, had become the most honest relationship of his life. What had started as a lie had become the foundation of unshakable truth. Their apartment building came into view, and Marcus could see neighbors gathering. On the front steps, eager to welcome Isabella home, Mrs. Rodriguez from downstairs had made a banner. The Patels from across the hall had brought flowers. Even grumpy Mr. Johnson from the third floor was there with a stuffed animal. "Look at that," Riley said, tears in her eyes. "Our whole community is here. That's what happens when you stop pretending and start living authentically," Alina observed from the back seat. "Real love attracts real love." As they walked toward their building, surrounded by well-wishers and carrying their precious daughter, Marcus realized that this was what happily ever after actually looked like. Not a perfect ending, but a perfect beginning. It's not the conclusion of their story, the start of a new chapter. Isabella would grow up hearing the story of how her parents met, how love conquered bureaucracy, how a fake marriage became the realest thing any of them had ever experienced. She would learn that family wasn't something you were born into, but something you created through daily choices, consistent care, and unwavering commitment. And someday, when Isabella faced her own challenges, her own moments of desperation or fear, she would remember the lesson her parents and grandmother had taught her, that love is always worth fighting for, that family is always worth protecting, and that sometimes the most beautiful truths grow from the most necessary lies. As they reached their front door, Marcus turned back one more time to look at the city skyline, where St. Mary's General Hospital stood as a reminder of where their journey had begun. But his attention was quickly drawn back to his wife and daughter, to Elena's laughter, to the warmth of their home and the promise of their future. The pretense was over. The performance had ended. What remained was real, permanent, and unbreakably. Strong Marcus Chen had pretended Riley Thompson was his wife at the hospital. Riley Thompson had made it real, and together they'd created something that would last forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.